Hi everyone, thanks for joining this session. This is the webinar that's new to our lineup and it's called Avoid the Health Sector Trap, Clarity, Not Complexity, Wins Online. Just before I get started, if there's any technical issues, if you can't hear me at the moment or see my screen, please feel free to drop a message in the chat and we'll do our very best to help you, but hopefully everyone can see my screen and hear me and we'll make a start. So very quick introduction to myself. My name is Will. I'm the founder and managing director here at Webbox. Webbox is a health sector specialist digital agency and we help our clients build and maintain websites and run digital marketing campaigns. And we've worked with organisations such as BBI Solutions, BioHit Healthcare, Voyage Care, the NHS, St John Ambulance, and many others to help them deliver website projects and better performance from their marketing campaigns. And it's really after doing this for the last 16, nearly 17 years now, that we've obviously gained a lot of insight in terms of what works and what doesn't work digitally. So I'm hoping to bring and share that insight with you today. Now, just a couple of things to let you know. We are recording today's session, so don't worry about making notes throughout the session. We will share a copy of that recording with you later this week. I'd also love you to get involved. So if you've got questions as we go through this content, please just feel free to pop them in the chat and I will leave some time at the end for questions. And as always, on our webinars, we love your feedback. So if you've got any feedback on this webinar or even topics that you'd like us to speak on in the future, please feel free to share that with us. Or if you're sharing on social, you can tag us at Webbox Digital. So the plan for today's session is to talk you through 9 clarity blockers that we've identified that ultimately bring complexity to a website and do not aid the user experience. So I'll talk you through those 9 points one by one. I then want to share with you a trend that we've seen over the last probably 18 months now that we're tracking quite closely. And I really hope that you'll do the same as well following this webinar. And then we'll have a time for a Q&A. So that's the plan for today's session. So without further ado, let's get into these clarity blockers and let's start with our first one. Now our first clarity blocker is not involving your users within your website project. Now, just before I explain this a little bit more, I'd love a quick show of hands from you. So if you want to use the hands up feature within Zoom, just to get involved in this. So pop your hands up if you involved external stakeholders or customers in your last website build project. So use the hands up feature within Zoom. Okay, we've got 1 or 2 going up now. Not many, okay. So percentage-wise, we're quite literally about 15-20% of the attendees we have on today's webinar. So, okay, it's a minority. Okay, thank you for getting involved. Really appreciate that. So about 15-20% of you had external stakeholders or customers involved in your last website project. Okay, so from our experience, not involving your external stakeholders or customers in your website build project, it is not going to bring the clarity that you're looking for. And I think if we're really honest with ourselves, it's because we inherently overcomplicate things. So we might overthink something, or maybe we're too close to the business or organization, therefore we just think in a slightly different way. Whereas if we're trying to get our customers involved in this process, hopefully it just gives us a completely different perspective on what they're looking for. So if you're looking to maybe redevelop your website, or even if you're just looking to move the needle and increase the engagement rate of your existing site, running some workshops or focus groups with key stakeholders or different user groups would be a really valuable thing for you to do, because it will open your eyes to maybe some of the pain points that they're experiencing on your site. And this is just one way to bring some real clarity to your website user experience, and of course to your messaging as well. Now, the second thing which we see time and time again is just websites filled with industry jargon. And obviously the health sector is just known for this, right? So it's really important to bring clarity to your site, that you speak your users' language. Now, this is purposely broad because I'm very conscious on today's call we will have a wide range of organisations within what is a vast health sector. And therefore, it's really important that you understand the audience in which you're serving. So understand your audience, who is your target persona, your target audience, understand how they speak, the kind of language that they would be able to understand very quickly. And it's that language that you need to use on your website. Now, this is quite difficult to do if, again, you're doing this just internally. So building upon the first point, it's really helpful to involve people from outside of the organisation when you're thinking about the language used on your site. Now, of course, because the health sector is so broad, there's always got to be a caveat. And the caveat is that there are some areas within health that actually require very detailed or technical or scientific information. And if that is your audience, if that's appropriate to the target audience, then that's fine. Okay, so that's the caveat, is there are some instances. So just to give an example, if you're a pharmaceutical who is selling into the sector, so maybe other people who are, farmers or pharmacies or something of that ilk, then they're going to understand that level of detail and the kind of industry jargon. Whereas if you're putting a service forward to an end user, then actually it's the end user's language that you need to use and not necessarily your internal kind of industry-driven jargon. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. But this is a really important exercise to do. And as I say, really important to get people from outside of the organization involved in sense checking the language used on your site. Now, the third point here is building upon content, and it's beware of information overload. I think we're all very good, especially now with AI writing a lot of content, to just put lots of words on our web pages. And I think actually we need to sometimes step back and understand that the way in which we digest information has changed. So if we're presented with a web page that has 2,000 words on it, which you better believe it is not uncommon these days, then actually it's just overwhelming to the user. There's just so much content to kind of digest. And if you were to use tools like Hotjar to track how people engage with that content, you'll quickly realize that they're not actually they're not reading all of it, they're not getting to the bottom of the page, and so on. So it's important that we understand that and surface the right information on our pages. This can create a real barrier for a lot of users. So not just users who might not want to read that amount of content, but also, I'll touch on it later, but from an accessibility perspective, you might have users who, let's say, have dyslexia, and actually reading that amount of content is a real task for them. So it's important that we understand that our content needs to be accessible for a wide range of users, and the content length is often a real barrier. So if you're looking to bring clarity through to your website, then having a really succinct message is important. Now, I'm really conscious in saying this that there's also a balance, isn't there? Because if you just had 50 words on a page, as an example, then actually that's not going to signal to Google enough information about the topic that you're talking about. And therefore, there are disadvantages from a ranking perspective. So we need to get the balance right. Generally speaking, we would, say to our clients, maybe shoot for, 400 to 600 words, give or take. But there are some ways to bridge the gap. Because actually, if it's a really important page, maybe it's a key landing page or it's one of your key services, then having a bit more information is important. But we don't want to overwhelm the user by having too much text on the page. So there are a few ways to overcome this, and I'll just share two with you. So the first would be to have your main body content, as I say, maybe between 400 and 600 words, but then you can add to that with content within accordions. So let's use the example of having a frequently asked questions section on your page. You could put quite a lot of word count within an FAQ section. So as an example, if each FAQ is 100 words, you could have 10 questions. Well, that's 1,000 words that you've put within an accordion. And it's important to touch on the fact that with an accordion, visually it's not overwhelming. So when the user lands on that page, it doesn't look like a lump of 1,000 words. But as they expand each question, they can then reveal that content. And also, of course, Google can rank it within the people also ask section of the Google results page. So there's lots of other benefits to doing that. So don't feel you're limited to, let's say, 400 to 600 words. There are other ways to overcome that that are still visually pleasing. Another example is to use a tactic we call storytelling, which is like an animation that as you scroll down the page, you might get some video, some text come in and so on. And it just allows you to digest information in a much easier way than having lots of words on a page. And I'll just show you a very quick example of what that looks like. So on this video, you can see as you scroll down the page, there's just lots of subtle animations and videos and text which come into play as the user scrolls down. And interestingly, because this is quite an animated page, the user will tend to engage with that and not want to click away. So they'll want to keep scrolling to see what's next. So that's quite a nice way to address this point. Okay, moving on to number 4, which is accessibility. Now, before I delve into this, again, I'd love you just to get involved and pop your hands up just using the hands up feature within Zoom. So if you could pop your hands up, if you considered accessibility during your website build. So think back to when your website was last created. Did you consider accessibility at that point? Okay, so we've got 25-30% of you, give or take. Okay, that's great. Thank you for getting involved. So yeah, 25-30% of people on the webinar today saying they did consider accessibility. Okay. So by focusing on accessibility throughout your website, whether it's at the build stage or whether it's actually just through ongoing maintenance, you will naturally bring clarity to the design and content. Now, this is just because accessibility guidelines will help you focus on things like minimum font sizes and appropriate color contrasts and good spacing around buttons and so on. And this brings a further level of clarity to your website. Now, there's a big myth, I feel, in the industry, which is accessibility compliance is only required for those in the public sector. Now, at Webbox, we're big advocates of accessibility and want to ensure that every website that we develop and maintain is accessible. So we're trying to kind of blow that myth away because actually it's really important that our websites can be accessible to the widest possible range of users. So something which was said to me by a leading institute in this area was that actually when we don't consider accessibility. Even like for a social media post, if we haven't put an alt tag on an image as part of our social post, then actually we've left the job half done. And I that really kind of rung true with me. I thought it was a really important point. So I just wanted to share that with you today. Now, there are a few guidelines that you can follow. As you can imagine, there's a few different standards that are around and about. But the one that we normally recommend is the WCAG 2.2. This is a series of guidelines specifically to how you can make sure your website is accessible. And there are different levels of compliance. So you might have heard of things like AA or AAA and so on. So generally speaking, if you're looking for some guidance there, we tend to aim for AA compliance. And that would, that would address the vast majority of users who need a website to be accessible. So really important that we do consider this, because it's not just an important web practice, but it's actually a really important element to bringing clarity to our websites, as I've just mentioned. Okay, moving on to number 5, and I'm sure this is a bugbear of all of ours, but it's having a confusing navigation and user experience. Now, the quickest way to bring complexity to your website is just to have a busy and confusing navigation. And it sounds a bit tongue-in-cheek, right? But so many websites that we audit have really confusing navigations. We actually did an audit on a website, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago now, and there were 4 layers of navigation. And within each layer, there was a good 10 to 15 links. It was almost overwhelming, and as a user, I just didn't know where to go. And that was probably one of the largest navigations that I've seen for some time. Now, your navigation can make or break the user experience of a website. But so often it's one of the last things that we actually consider. So when we're maybe building a website, or maybe you're just giving your website a bit of a refresh at the moment, we don't often consider the navigation, well, at least maybe as much as we should. So I wanted to break this down into 3 areas to help you, to help you review your own navigation from these 3 areas. So the first is the layout of the navigation. So you should consider what layout is most appropriate for your website. Now, when I'm talking about layout, I'm talking about you could have a full screen navigation, which is what we've got in the screenshot on the slide now. You could have a navigation which just opens up in a hamburger menu, like a mobile menu. You could have a sticky navigation, which sticks to the top of the page as the user scrolls down, so on and so forth. All of these are different ways to lay out a navigation, and you need to consider which is the right one for you based on 2 factors: how many links you have within your navigation, because that's quite important, and secondly, what's going to work best for your particular target audience. Second, you need to think about hierarchy. Now, how often does this happen in your organization, where someone says, please, can you add this to the website? It's really important. And then the next week, someone from a different department says, please, can you add this to the website? It's really important. And what happens over time is that your main navigation just becomes really cluttered, really busy, because people just keep adding things to the top navigation. This is where hierarchy comes in. It's really understanding what needs to be a priority on the navigation, and then what could maybe be a sublink, or maybe in a footer menu or somewhere else, because not everything holds the same level of importance. So it's really important to consider the hierarchy of your navigation. And then finally, the content that's used within your navigation. So this is the words, the actual terminology which you use on the navigation should be, referring back to my first point, not full of jargon, okay? So again, we audited a website recently, and within their navigation, they had the names of their products, but these product names only meant something to people in that business who knew what that product was. So it means nothing to anyone else. So if I just generalize this and just say product A and product B, when you're seeing that in a navigation and you see product A or product B, how do you know which one to click on? You've got no idea, the pros and cons of each one or what it is that they actually do. So we need to think about the language in which we use in our navigation and make sure it's accessible and understandable by our target audience. Now, if you are a service-based organization, I do have a specific tip for you, and that is that if you're currently listing out the services in which your organization offers, then you should also, alongside that, list out the solutions, or some people call it the challenges that you can address. Let me just give you a real example, but using Webbox, if I can. So I could talk to you about the services Webbox offers. I could say it's, website development, website maintenance, pay-per-click, SEO, and so on. And that's great if you know the service that you're looking for. But actually, a lot of users don't know the exact service they're looking for, but they know the challenge that they have. So the challenge might be, as the one on screen, we've got a lack of user engagement. And at that point, it's then for Webbox to consult on the right service and way forward to address that challenge. Or another challenge might be, we're not driving enough leads into the business from our website, or our website isn't integrated with our CRM. These are challenges which I think everyone that I've ever come across, could understand. Whereas actually, if I said a list of services, some people might or might not know what PPC or SEO is and what the difference is and the pros and cons. So just a quick tip, if you are a service-based organization, we do encourage service-based organizations to have both services and solutions within their navigation so that you can get people to this ultimately the same endpoint, but from two entry points that are more accessible. Okay, moving on to number 6, and this is all about having a good mobile experience. Now, again, no one should be surprised by this because, mobile-friendly websites have been around for some time. But actually, if you're in the process of designing a new website or updating your existing one, then you need to consider taking a different approach, which is a mobile-first design approach. Now, it's clear from the data that mobile design is more important than ever because statistically, over 60% of your users will come to your website using a mobile device, and that's across the board. Therefore, it's really important that our websites are easy to navigate, easy to use, and just have a really good experience from both a mobile and desktop device. Now, as part of this, it's important that our content is what we call thumb friendly, and that's what the screenshot is on screen here today. So content within the green areas would be easy to access using your thumb, whereas in the orange zone, it's going to be quite a bit of a stretch. And then in the red zone, it's going to be quite difficult. So important just to consider where you put content on a page, because ideally it would be within one of those green zones, worst case scenario in the orange zone if you're happy for someone to stretch a little bit. Now there's also some side benefits to this. So if you're going to improve your mobile experience, it will have a knock-on effect and a positive impact on your page speed as well. So there's some benefits just outside of just improving the mobile experience too. Now you might be saying, I don't feel this is applicable to me because the vast majority of our users are using a desktop. And I take that point on board completely. However, even if that is applicable to you, Google is a mobile first index. And what that means is Google look at your mobile site, your mobile page speed, how your mobile navigation is, your mobile user experience, so on and so forth, to build up a picture and to rank your website. So it's really important that even if, let's say, 90% of your users visit your website on a desktop, that we don't underestimate the importance of having a good mobile experience for your site. Moving on to number 7, and this is about using trust signals and your credentials. Now, another way to bring clarity to your website is to build trust and to do that quickly. And this can be done by including trust signals and credentials throughout your site. So, for example, if you're a provider of care, then including your CQC rating on the relevant page would be a tick in the box. But you could also include certifications, testimonials, awards, affiliations, and so on to just build that level of trust. Now, it is important because our websites are this kind of faceless interface between our target audience and the business. And it's really important that we build trust very quickly. And you could probably do that if you were actually pitching to your target audience in person. You could build trust in a number of ways. But actually, it's very difficult for our websites to do the same. So it's really important that we have trust signals on the site to build that trust quickly, which ultimately brings more clarity to what it is that you're offering and why someone should inquire with you and not one of your competitors. Now, moving on to forms, and if you've been on any of our previous webinars, I'm sure you'll be aware that forms is always a bugbear of mine. So, similar to my point about navigation, forms can also be left feeling like an afterthought. It's often the last thing that we do. We might just embed a form on a page quickly before the website goes live, or someone's asked you to launch a new product page and we just pop a form at the bottom to generate some leads. However, poor user experience on a form will not bring clarity. And ultimately, it just leads to really poor conversion rates. Now, long forms, long forms are a real barrier to entry. If a form feels like it's going to be hard work, then people will just abandon it, okay? Now, just keeping this balanced, sometimes having a long form is necessary, and there are some justifications for that. Now, if that is you and you feel like having a long form is necessary, then there's two things we'd really suggest you do. The first would be to ensure that you've got advanced tracking in place so that you can gather data on how people use the form. So, do they complete all of it, or do they drop out at a certain point? What fields are they dropping out on? And maybe that's a sticking point, so on and so forth. But having that data at your fingertips will help you evolve the form further. The other tip would be, if you have a long form, to spread this out over multiple steps. So when the user looks at the form, if they can see 30 fields that they've got to fill in, that can be overwhelming. But if we break it down into 3 steps of 10 fields, it just feels more manageable. So again, breaking it down into multi-step forms would be a good thing for you to do. But I think, coming back to the original point, it's really important that we just ask for the information that we need, because actually if we ask for any more, then often that will become a barrier and ultimately not bring that clarity to your site. Now, whilst we're talking about forms, I just want to very quickly show you 2 types of forms that could be a game changer on your site. So the first is having a full screen form. Now, why does this help? What we see from the data is that when you see a form, the user can often get distracted with other elements on that page. So they might see some content or a call to action, they'll see the navigation and so on. And these just become a distraction to the primary thing that you want them to do, which is fill out the form. So actually opening up a form full screen and just having the fields there can be quite an impactful way to get that conversion. And a provider that we often recommend is a company called Typeform, who have a really elegant user interface to their forms. Now, a second suggestion is to maybe incorporate what's called a progressive lead form. Now, this is where you show normally a short form on the user's first visit. So let's just take a newsletter sign-up form as an example. So you might, on their first visit, just ask for their name and email address, because that's the two bits of information that you need to send them your newsletter. Now, once you've gathered that information, it would feed into your CRM, like a HubSpot, Salesforce, Dynamics kind of platform. But then you're tracking when they're going to come back to your website. And the great thing about that is when they come back to the website for the second time, we know that we've already got their name and email address. So at that point, we're asking for other bits of information. So it might be, could you give us your job title and the company name as an example, okay? And at that point then, you're just drip feeding more information into your CRM over time, which is enriching your data, but also it's not overwhelming the user with giving you lots of information at one sitting. So this is a great way to gather more data if you're willing to play the slightly longer game. Now, our ninth and final point is incorporating personalization. Now, before I go on, let me just show you an example of what I mean by personalization. So this little video shows you two users who are accessing a web page, and the user on the left sees a different version of that page to the user on the right, who sees a different version altogether. But they're actually viewing the same page. It's the same URL. It's just adjusted based on what the website knows about that user. So firstly, let's understand why it's important to consider personalization on your site. Now, ultimately, this comes down to understanding that not all users are the same. So they need a personalized experience. Now, thanks to analytics tools, web applications not only determine who came to the site, but also it can adapt the content to a certain user experience, or it can change the content for a particular user. And to give you an example, completely out of sector, but you might have seen the launch of the new iPhone this week and other things. One of the ways that Apple incorporates personalization is that it will adjust the level of animation on the site depending on how quickly the user is navigating around the site. So if they're going very quickly to the product pages that they're interested in, it dials down the amount of animation because that user doesn't need the kind of fluff. It just wants to get straight to the content. Whereas if you're browsing at kind of a more normal pace around the site, then they want you to experience that animation and to kind of draw you in. So that's just one way that Apple have applied this principle. Now, as consumers, we want information that's relevant to us and to be presented in the most convenient and concise way. Now, websites that display personalized content generally have the highest engagement and conversion rates. So there's a number of ways you could implement this. And if you want to just kind of maybe do some research following this webinar, I'd encourage you to have a look at a platform called Personalize. So Personalize is a great platform for plumbing in this kind of functionality into your existing site. And there's many others as well. Recombi is one that we've used as well. But these are platforms which can help you start to personalize the content on your website based on what we know about that user. So it's a really kind of impactful way to bring more clarity through to your site. Now I'm going to move on a little bit as we draw towards a close, and I want to share with you a key trend that we've been watching all of last year and this year, and one that I really hope that you'll be watching soon as well. And it's in relation to AI overviews. So I'm sure you've seen when you do a Google search, at the top of some of those search pages, you'll have an AI overview. And statistically at the moment, they are appearing in about 20 to 60% of searches, and those numbers are only going up. So here's my example. I've just searched pharmaceutical testing, and it's just come up with a description as to kind of what that is at the top of a Google search page. And then it references websites on the right-hand side so that you know where it's got that information from. Now, what's really interesting is this next slide. So the keywords from specifically the health sector are triggering far more AI overviews than any other sector. Okay, so when we look at this graph, the important side of it is the blue side. So if you look from the right-hand side, you'll notice that the longest line is against the health sector. And actually most other sectors are quite a far way behind what that is, which is approximately about 55%. So around about 55% of searches which are related to the sector are generating an AI overview. Now, why is that important? It's important because we will naturally see in a sector a reduction in the number of people coming through to our websites because they might be getting the answer from the AI overview. However, it's not all bad news because it's important that we gear up your websites to have a chance of appearing within the AI overview. So there's a number of things that you should be doing on your website. Tagging content, writing content that Google wants to index, doing competitor research to understand why competitors are being chosen in those areas, so on and so forth. The list is very long, and we can have a conversation around that another time if that's of interest. But it's important that we're gearing up for this change because, of course, it's here to stay. So rather than just see diminished numbers come through to the site, it's really important that we are adapting our website accordingly to have an opportunity to appear in this AI overviews section. Now, just before we move to a time of questions, I just wanted to touch on a few very quick things. So at Webbox, we have a suite of documents and resources that can just help marketers within the industry day to day. So when I send out the webinar recording, which will probably be tomorrow, I will send a link to a number of different resources that you're very welcome to download if they're applicable to you. Some of the ones that we've got are listed on screen here. The second thing is I've mentioned that we audit websites and also PPC campaigns, and I just wanted to extend that offer to those that have attended this webinar today. So if you're looking for better performance out of your website or marketing campaign, then the team at Webbox would love the opportunity to audit your website or campaign. Now, we do that manually, so it's not a tool that we just put your URL into. One of our team will sit down and go through your website, audit it against a number of different criteria, things like page speed, accessibility, design, navigation, and so on. And we will then arrange a call with you to play back that report. So if that's of interest, you can scan the QR code, and again, I'll send you a link to request that tomorrow. And then finally, we run lots of these webinars, one or two each month, and we'd love you to join our upcoming webinars. So we've just launched kind of webinars for Q4, and some of the titles you can see on screen. One of my favorites is going to be the penultimate point on screen there. So it's the 2026 website checklist, 15 essentials that you can't ignore. If you'd like to join any of those sessions, you can scan the QR code, follow us on Eventbrite, and please register for any of those free sessions. But for now, let's move into a time of questions. I'm very happy to stay around for a few minutes just to answer any questions that you may have. Whilst I've been talking, I've seen a couple pop up. So let me just pull up my window and we can go through some of these. Okay, great. So I've got one sent to me directly. So let me just read it out initially. So the question is, so there's a lot of good recommendations here that we need to take away and implement. How would you advise we go about action in the recommendations? Okay, great. So thank you for your question. So I'm very conscious there's quite a number of recommendations here, and for some organizations, they might need to make quite a few changes to their site off the back of this. So if that's you, I'd probably break down the list in terms of how long it might take you to implement some of these. So kind of like the time versus benefit ratio, and prioritize it accordingly. So as an example, implementing personalization into your website might take a little bit of time and investment, whereas looking at your navigation is probably a much simpler task. So I would probably adjust the priority by that, and hopefully you can then start to have some quick wins before you get to some of the more challenging points. Okay, let's go on to another question here. So, do you have any advice on working around the health in personalized advertising Google Ads policy? Yes, we very much do. We've very recently written a blog post specifically on this. So actually off the back of that, let me send out a link to that blog post. Because there's lots of information in there which will help you go through those guidelines. And then if you've got questions off the back of it, please let me know. Okay, let's go on to the next question. So we can split what we do into 3 areas, which are relatively simple to understand. Currently, they're listed individually in the menu. Would you recommend having this as a drop-down under a menu title like what we do, or something similar? It's a question from Laura. Okay, great question. What I would probably do initially is I'd step back and I'd look at the full navigation and count how many top navigation links that you have. If you have 6 or less, then you could, and they comfortably fit within the navigational space, then I would potentially look to leave those 3 separate within the main nav. However, if you've got more than 6 and the navigation feels quite busy, then it makes complete sense to put that under a drop-down entitled What We Do. So there's a balance there which I think needs to be weighed up with the wider context as to what's on your navigation. The other element is if you have got 3 areas and they're kind of service lines, then obviously to the point earlier about maybe incorporating solutions, what you could do then is have a drop down for what we do, and then you could have another one for solutions or challenges we solve or whatever phrasing you want to use. And you could have both side by side. Now it's important that any change you make to the navigation has got a number of things in place. One, you want to keep the URL structure the same. And if it can't stay the same, let Google know about different redirects that need to be put in place. And secondly, I would gather some data. So have a bit of a before and after picture. So, before we change the navigation, these are a suite of metrics that we've been tracking. And then after we change the navigation, we're going to then compare those metrics to make sure that it's had a positive impact rather than a negative one. Okay, hopefully that's answered the question. Let me just check if there's any others. Oh yes, got some in the Q&A. Okay, great. So how would you recommend getting in touch with our customers to get their thoughts and feedback during a website build? Okay, really good question, because there are a number of ways to do this. So if you're building a website at the moment or thinking about doing that soon, getting feedback from your users is really important, but of course, there are a number of ways to do that, and you might decide on one way over another based on what you know about that particular user group. So as an example, you could send them a link to a design concept or a staging website and ask them to provide feedback. The downside with doing that, though, is you might not get comprehensive feedback. So people might just give you a one-liner and that's it. But the positive to that is it's not a huge time suck for that kind of customer. The way that we like to do it at Webbox is actually to have an in-person focus group. And we as the agency would host that, but obviously the organization could also host it. And what you could do is get 8 to 12 people in a room, and you could have a design concept on screen. But that's an opportunity where you can actually pose really specific questions. And if you feel like someone's just given you quite a vanilla answer, of course you've got the opportunity to kind of dig a bit deeper. So that's why I think in person works quite well. But if that doesn't work for you, then I think you'd need to kind of be sending out structured questions to customers. Give them 5 questions or 10 questions that you need responses to. And that's important because when you gather all of the responses back, you need something to benchmark those against. So if everyone's just giving you feedback in a different format, it's very difficult to kind of pool that together. So yeah, if you can do it in person, that would be my ideal. If you can't, then have a structured list of questions that you send to customers. Okay, great. Moving to another question here. I'd be keen to hear your insights on the restrictions around retargeting in healthcare PPC and meta ads, please. Okay, yes. So this actually, Monique, is a really good question. This actually aligns well with the question earlier around the blog post we've written, because we're acutely aware within the sector there are a lot of restrictions when it comes to paid advertising. We run a lot of paid advertising campaigns, and obviously we've been up against our fair share of issues over the years where you've got to work through those. So retargeting can be a bit of a minefield. What I'm going to say in this instance is I'm going to share a blog post with you which I think is going to answer the question. We've only just very recently written it. Our head of performance marketing has been involved in that process. So I'll share that with you. And if off the back of that you've got additional questions, we'd love to hear back from you. Okay. Great. Okay, so I think that's all of them. I'm just double checking the chat and the Q&A window in case there's any more. No, that's everything. Okay, fantastic. Well, look, as we move towards a close, I just want to say a massive thank you for taking the time this morning to listen to this content. I do hope the 9 points have been helpful to you, and they will help you improve the performance of your website. And I also just want to remind you that, Webbox are really happy to audit your website or campaign. So if that would be of use to you, I'll include a link in my email tomorrow. We'd love to hear from you and further the conversation. But for now, thank you so much for joining, and I hope you have a really good rest of your day. Thanks.